And we got Jose. Hey, Jose. And Liberty. Hey, Liberty. I like that. Andy and I Smell is here. Hey, Lars. Hey, Cake Boy and Banjo. How you guys doing? Thanks for liking the live. I do appreciate it. So I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv for Wednesday, November the 8th, 2023, day 623 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And who else is here? Nightshade. Hey, Magic. How you doing, buddy? Scooby-Doo. Anthony Tommy Tom. How you doing, Anthony? Magic, you are a gentleman and a scholar. Hey, John Williams. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Jerome Pruitt. Long time no see. How you doing, pal? Ashley is here. Me in Ukraine. Hey, me in Ukraine. Hey, Bobby. I don't know what that's. Okay. Evening, Sharon. Hey, Sharon. How you doing? Stephen, nice to see you. Lucky. Lucky. Hey, PT. How you doing, pal? Hey, I saw you one-upped me, boy. You sure did. You posted about the drone school attack, and you did it to schools out for summer. And that was killer. I'm pretty sure that was you, wasn't it, PT? Plugging along, Jeff. Hey, Glenn. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, dude, that was brilliant. I really liked that. I really liked that a lot. There we go. Let's try that. Let's give that a go. Alice Cooper. Yeah, that was you in the comments. Me in Ukraine. Then I saw PT did a video where he did exactly what you were suggesting. Hey, Rob Walker. And there's Cheyenne. All right, Cheyenne is here, so we can get started. So, guys, it is Wednesday, November the 8th, day 623 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And in the last 24 hours, the Russians have lost 8 tanks, 22 APVs, and 29 artillery systems. And the top story tonight was going to be the missile attack against Taganrog Air Base, but now that's number 2. Because within the last couple of hours, the Russians have struck a civilian grain shipment, or rather a ship coming into port in Odessa. It's a Liberian ship, or a ship flying the Liberian flag at any rate. I haven't determined the ownership of the vessel yet. And the crew is Philippine, and 3 of the crew have been injured. 1 has been hospitalized. I've seen it reported that the captain of the ship was unalived in the attack. That does not appear to be the case. What does appear to be the case is that 1 harbor worker was also injured in the attack, and a harbor captain. So that's one of the guys responsible for port activities, right? And for the management of the port. And so the casualty in this attack appears to be a Ukrainian national who works in the port of Odessa. The implications of this attack are unclear to me. It appears that the ship itself, a civilian cargo vessel, entering the port unloaded, right, coming in to pick up grain, was fired upon likely by an Su-25 out over the Black Sea using a KH-31P anti-radiation missile, perhaps 2 of those missiles. And that would explain why it was the harbor captain that was unalived. It's possible that a tugboat was hit as the ship was being brought into the port. It appears that the ship was transitioning from open sea to the port and was likely being guided by some tugs, which would, of course, be captained by Ukrainians. Now, the Philippine government is going to be unhappy that its nationals have been injured in this conflict. One would think that if the ship is Liberian, that the Liberian interests behind the ship are going to be very unhappy about it. It's an international incident. It's a war crime. Although, now this is not my ballywick, but because the vessel wasn't in open sea, it was in the port, it may not be a war crime technically. I'm not certain on that. I'm not clear on that. And I'm not a maritime lawyer. So I'm waiting for the experts to chime in on this as to what the status of the ship was if it was in that transition from open sea to the port. But no matter how you cut it, it's a crime. It's a crime. It's a crime and a shame. And it's an attack not just on a single civilian cargo ship, but rather on the food security of the people of the African continent. That's the victim here. True, in the near term, it's the Ukrainian economy which suffers, and which clearly the short term goal for Putin is to cripple the Ukrainian economy as much as he possibly can. But long term, the implications of shutting off Ukrainian grain to the rest of the world is to increase food insecurity in a food insecure world. And that's the kind of thing that can't be allowed. It's uncivilized at its core. It makes Putin an agent of Kremlin chaos in the world. When we talk, remember we used to talk about the agents of chaos, right? Maxwell Smart. That's what these guys are up to. It's what they're up to in Sudan. It's what they're up to in Syria. It's what they're up to with Hamas. It's what they're up to with North Korea. They want to plunge the world into chaos so that only they can steal everything for themselves. They have no interest in civilization, which some of us think is a real thing. They're not interested in the hard questions of what it takes for us to build a just society, the city of peace on the hill. They don't care. They want to be able to rob and pillage and plunder at will. And it cannot be allowed. And they can't be allowed to hold 140 million Russians hostage while they do it either. This behavior is societal suicide. It's not a condition which can be maintained. Now, I was going to start by talking about Taganrog. Taganrog is a Russian air base just inside of Russia from Donetsk, just across the Ukrainian border, on the way to Rostov-on-Don. And that's the location where all those helicopters in the Russian helicopter fleet were relocated to after the attacks on Berdyansk and Luhansk that did so much damage to the Russian helicopter fleet. That airbase was struck by apparently Ukrainian missiles today. It could be a drone attack. We don't have confirmation yet on what the attack was, but from what the locals are reporting in the Russian Telegram channels, it looks like it was missiles. Now, the only missiles that the Ukrainians currently have that they could use to strike targets outside of Ukraine are their repurposed Neptunes and the repurposed S-200s. It's entirely possible that it was a combination of those missiles and decoys, or it may have been a drone attack where it's unclear at this time. But here's the beauty of it. The Russians had to move the helicopters out to Taganrog because they were no longer safe in Ukraine, right? Increasing the distance, say, to Robotny from 180 kilometers round trip to over 420 kilometers round trip, drawing the fangs of those helicopters' efficacy. They're no longer any good. They can't run the kind of sorties they used to run. They can't stay out as long as they used to be able to stay out because they use up all the fuel en route there. And they got to have enough to get back. The effectiveness of these helicopters to wage war has been greatly diminished by moving them away from the front line. And now they've got to move them even farther back. And at 420 kilometers round trip, they're just about as far from the front line as they can go without having to refuel. If they've got to move them farther back, they're done. They're done. They don't have the fuel to get there and back again. They're worthless. And that's a great thing for the Ukrainians, especially with F-16s on the horizon. The Taganrog attack demonstrates that the Ukrainians continually are winning the deep battle against the Russians, curbing their ability to execute war, reducing their capacity to defend the front line from a distance, and changing the fundamental behavior of the Russians in the same way that the Black Sea Fleet is now hiding in Novosibirsk. The Russian helicopter fleet has been completely decapitated, either destroyed or driven so far away that they are no longer a threat, is what it looks like. I put up 2 videos today that I knew would not get a lot of views, but for regular followers of this channel, you will appreciate them if you take the time to take a look at them. It's 14 facts about about U.S. aid to Ukraine in the defense of the people of Ukraine. And these are facts. Personally, I have problems with the Hudson Institute. They're a very conservative think tank. They can sometimes be alarmist, particularly about the Chinese threat. They seem to think China is a bigger threat than I do, and a more imminent one. But in this piece, 14 facts about U.S. aid to Ukraine, they are not wrong, and they are very clear. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. Now, dig it. Here's the top line. The other stuff in the article is great. But the one thing that all of us hear all the time from people that don't support Ukraine is how much money it's costing the United States. Oh, we can't afford to help Ukraine. All that money, it's just the Biden crime family laundering money. We're sending pallets of cash on C-130s to Ukraine. There are people who believe this. And it is important for those of us who are rational and who are paying attention to how the world really works, that we look them in the eye and we say bullshit. Of the $76 billion that we've spent on Ukraine, 70 billion of it hasn't left the United States. 70 billion of your tax dollars has been reinvested into the American defense industry. Why? Because what we did for Ukraine was just clean out the garage. right? Now, look, the neighbors need some stuff. We have some old stuff in the garage. It's thoughtful of us to do that. We get our garage cleaned out, and then we get a bunch of new shit. And the Ukrainians have the stuff that they need to defend themselves. But all we've done really is clean out the garage. The new stuff that we're getting, the stuff that's on order, that's $70 billion that went out to Raytheon and General Dynamics and Berkshire Hathaway and everybody else, that $70 billion is going right to our guys. They're getting the new shit. And in the meantime, Ukraine has some stuff to defend itself with. That alone should be enough to shut most of these naysayers up. I know it's not, but it should be that kind of fact. But you can hit them with this too. Seeing American weapons on display, right? And these guys always claim to be patriots. So appeal to that part of them that makes them feel good about American weapons, being used against the commies. Our weapons, our second and third generation weapons, our 30-year-old weapons are kicking the ass of the Russian fourth generation weapons, the S-400 missile systems, right? That kind of thing. And they're kicking Russian ass so bad that the Russian defense industry is in a dramatic decline. Nobody wants Russian weapons anymore, and with good reason. Meanwhile, orders from Europe and our other allies for American hardware are through the roof. $90 billion this year alone in new orders. That's $160 billion going to plants in 38 states. Almost the whole country is benefiting directly. And these are some of the best paid, best manufacturing jobs in America. 38 states are benefiting directly from that $160 billion in new defense spending between ourselves and our allies. Poland alone ordered, what the heck did they order? It was something ridiculous, like 50 Patriot defense batteries. Holy cowabunga. From Poland alone. It's huge, huge. That's one of the reasons the American economy is doing well as the rest of the globe teeters on the edge of recession. It's one of the reasons. That and much more good factual data is in the Hudson Institute's 14 Facts About U.S. Aid to Ukraine, which anybody here can Google, and I encourage you to do so and take a look at it in detail. Another big thing that people talk about is they talk about how this is costing every American family $900 in taxes. It's not. People who say that do not understand the graduated tax system in our country. And the Hudson Institute does a fine job of putting all the math on paper for those of you who are not math averse, as so many of us are. November 1st, I reported to you that there was an attack on the Dnipro HQ of the Russian Federation forces. And we didn't know at the time. There were rumors that General Teplinsky was there at the time. He was not. He was not there. He was not injured in that attack. However, today we got confirmation that Colonel Alexei Koblov, operations commander of the VDV, was lost in that attack, as well as two deputy heads of the VDV command post, Colonel Vadim Dobrikov and Colonel Alexander Galkin. This was essentially a decapitation of the VDV command in Dnipro. Huge, huge. Don't underestimate it. In some good international news today, Moldova and Ukraine have entered the EU negotiation for accession stage, and our friend Georgia will attain EU candidacy. This is a historic day for three countries that were formerly under the aegis of the USSR and are emerging from under the thumb of the Kremlin into their own democratic institutions and life as part of a greater EU. And I'd like to congratulate everybody on this next step and wish them a speedy accession into the EU. We saw last night, I reported on the assassination of one of Zelensky's top aides. Today, Ukrainian partisans in Luhansk struck back, and Colonel Mikhailo Filipenko, former head of the LPR National Police Directorate, was assassinated by a partisan car bomb in Luhansk. That's one less war criminal that needs to be on trial. The Vladimir Zoga drone operator school in Donetsk was bombed out of existence today. And I got to give kudos to me in Ukraine, and especially to PT82, whose video featured shots of what was left of the school under the music, School's Out for Summer, School's Out Forever. Really good stuff, man. Now, this operator school, there's some interesting things about this school. Not only were they training drone operators there, but it was the center of Russian disinformation in Donetsk. It appears that way anyway. That the information directorate for the Russian army in Donetsk was located in the building, along with a troll farm that was pumping out Russian disinformation to the rest of the world, although particularly focused on Ukraine, and creating civil unrest and problems here in Ukraine. Now, what's curious about this, the school was named for Commander Vladimir Zoga of the Donetsk People's Republic Army. This guy was killed in action back in March of 2022, only 28 years old. So they named this school after him. And they put up a plaque this past March of 2023, naming the school the Vladimir Zoga Memorial Drone School, right? TASS, the Russian news service, carried the story, put up pictures of the school, said where it was, said what they did there, talked about the troll farm that was there, talked about the disinformation services that were there, talked about everything, practically gave the Ukrainians a map to the place. And apparently that was the intelligence which led to the HIMARS strike, the successful HIMARS strike today that destroyed that drone operator school. It's amazing. Russia continues shelling civilian villages up and down the line, and yesterday used cluster munitions on at least one Ukrainian village, where an elderly couple were unalived because of it. Remember, Russian cluster munitions are very different from American cluster munitions. American cluster munitions have a dud rate of about 2 to 4%. Russian cluster munitions can have a dud rate as high as 30%. So if there's 100 bomblets in a shell, 30 of them lay on the ground unexploded in civilian areas where kids can pick them up. And that's what the Russians are firing at up to 118 Ukrainian villages up and down the line today. Ukraine says that it has now captured and has over 17,000 POWs since the start of the war. There are currently so many POWs coming in, adding to this number, that they are being forced to open a new POW camp. The situation, this is apparently because the situation at the front is so bad for the Russians, and because the Russians aren't exchanging prisoners, the Ukrainians are being forced to open a new camp in Vinistia, and that camp will, of course, conform to all the requirements of the Geneva Convention humanitarian standards. The One Way Aerospace Company, which is a great name. I love the Ukrainians and their sensibilities. So some entrepreneur here has started a company called the One Way Aerospace Company. And today it was announced they have begun mass production of their version of the Shahed drone with 1,000-mile range. Pardon me, 1,000-kilometer range, about 600 miles. 1,000-kilometer range on a Shahed drone produced in Ukraine. Reverse engineered, no doubt, from the many Shaheds that have fallen on this country. It's brilliant. It's brilliant beyond words. And where is Alanis Morissette when you have a chance to really explain to her what that word means, huh? Finally, Ukraine has announced they will not be able to have elections. They wanted to have elections. They were trying to have elections. It's not going to happen. It's important to note that Ukraine is an emergent democracy. It doesn't have 200 years of democratic institutions to rely on. It's got to be noted that Ukraine doesn't have the money to run elections. It asked the Europeans and its allies for more money for the elections. We did not pony it up. There's a problem with getting people out of the country. You got 7 million Ukrainians out of the country. How do we get their votes to count? And what do we do about everybody in the occupied territories that should have a say? Combine that with the fact that under the Constitution of this country, when this country is at war or martial law is declared, elections are suspended for that time. And getting around that legal issue is another concern. Zelensky tried a number of gambits, or he appeared to anyway, to try a number of gambits to solve these problems and have elections. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. And it's a shame because it would be good for this country to see itself as a functioning democracy, even in time of war. But the challenges, the obstacles, and the distraction when things are so dire, it is not to be. It is not to be. Okay. So, guys, that's the top line. Those are the reports. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to end the YouTube live stream because I cannot read the TikTok Q&A from here. And I'm going to have to move that. So for my one guy on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks, pal. Okay.